Gregory, I would call that a scientist. You're a scientist, aren't you?
Oh yeah, and one of the things I'm proud of, I was just accepted as I'm called an expert reviewer for the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change for the sixth assessment report. So that gives me a little gravitas. And actually, I testified yesterday morning before the Pennsylvania House Energy and Environment Committee concerning some proposed cap and trade system for the state of Pennsylvania. So it was pretty interesting.
Where do you fall down on cap and trade?
Well, it's bad. It's a tax. They're artificial. The purpose for cap and trade is to artificially inflate coal-fired and natural gas-fired electricity rates. They're artificially inflated in order to make wind and solar look better and be able to make them compete. And that's the object. Well, the overarching goal of cap and trade and any other type of carbon tax is to change the temperature of the Earth, isn't it? That's their goal. They think that carbon dioxide is the control knob on the atmosphere, and it's just not. It hasn't been throughout geologic history. We can point that out through millions of years or many thousands, hundreds of thousands of years. CO2 just has not been the control knob on the temperature. It just hasn't. And what they're trying to tell you and your listeners is that, oh, well, that's all changed 100 years ago. All of Earth's history, just that really, don't even look at that. Just put the blinders on and only look at the last 100 and 150 years. And I can't do that. I'm a geologist. We need to look at the much longer perspective of climate change.
Let's go from Pennsylvania to California.
Yeah.
California has spent a lot of resources, I'm assuming, at least, telling people, hey, you need to be environmentally conscious. Why don't you kick the gas guzzler and get an electric car? And then they shut the power off. What can you tell us? I understand Gavin Newsom is blaming the power shutoffs on the utility companies, claiming it's about greed. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, it is. Most of the fires are sparked by these downed electrical lines. That's nearly all the fires are human caused, not arson, but human caused. Either sparks from machinery. Most of them, though, are these Santa. And I think we need to talk at some point here about what causes the Santa Ana winds that down the power lines. But the power lines, this could be solved if the power lines were buried, not strung through poles on trees. That's one of the big problems. You get these transformers sparking, and they're down because you got the Santa Ana winds start up this time of year, and they can reach speeds of, excuse me, pardon me. You'll have to forgive me. I hear that's bad radio. I know,
but it's fine. It's real. It's like reality TV.
Well, Yeah, right. You please forgive me. And but these Santa Ana winds, and they're blaming it on climate change. The fact of the matter is the source. I don't know if you know much about the cause of this, but you're in that general area. But the source of these winds are the high mountain cold air that's cooler than the air down along the coast, and actually it's exacerbated by colder temperatures and sometimes by dry, frigid Arctic air from Canada that comes down that actually exacerbates this. So rather than climate change and global warming causing it, it's sometimes these winds are exacerbated by the Arctic frigid air in the high mountainous areas. And then there's a high pressure of the system up there. When you get a low pressure system out in the ocean, you get these winds that rush down out of the high mountainous, the basin range areas, the high desert areas that are inland, and they rush down, and then they're focused through these mountain passes. So the wind speeds can get over 80 miles an hour,
wow.
often 40, 50 miles an hour, as they're rushing through these mountain passes. And what happens too, as that cold high air rushes down through these canyons and descends, it starts heating up. from cold air. As it's lower, as it gets lower, the heating effect, the adiabatic heating effect, actually dries out the air and makes it a lot warmer. So this is not a global warming or climate change issue. This has been going on for probably tens of thousands of years. And so what we have there are these. Now we've got this high volume, high wind speed, low humidity winds rushing down through these passes, and for the most part, a lot of California is a desert or semi-desert arid area to begin with, and then when that's exacerbated by the poor forest management processes that we've seen exhibited over the last 40 or 50 years that have added 5 or 6 times too many trees per acre. So now you got all this fuel, all this aridity, high winds, down power lines sparking. It's just a recipe for disaster. But this has been going on probably since before we ever arrived on the scene.
I got to wonder. I've got this article here in front of me, politics over at politicsn300.com. Will California voters see the light in 2020 after this PG&E disaster? That's the power company. It says California's government has a history of agenda-driven politics and incompetence that's led to the current disastrous state of affairs, from the homelessness crisis, medieval diseases, feces on the streets, lack of affordable housing, outrageous taxes. And, I got to thinking about that. You're exactly right. Those power lines should be buried underground. Now, I know they probably got to come up from above ground at some point, but
right. Problem solved.
Yeah, exactly. Problem over. But where's their? They have this high tax state. Why haven't they done anything about this from an infrastructure standpoint?
Well, the utilities are a lot like state government and federal government. Go to the DMV, go get your driver's license, and see. You better schedule a 5-hour or 6-hour window of your day to go get your driver's license. Same, and the same thing in Postal Service. When I go to mail my books out, Postal Service, although it's not necessarily a utility, they seem to often be run that way. Mm-hmm. And we see the same thing. These utilities just aren't. They're basically, most utilities are guaranteed a 5 or 6% return on the money, no matter how badly or how well they're run. And so there's no incentive for excellence. Their only incentive is to spend more money because they could then make a little bit more money.
Mm-hmm. We're talking with geologist Gregory Wrightstone, author of this book, Inconvenient Facts, the Science Al Gore Doesn't Want You to Know About. I've got this video here I want to play for you, Gregory. Hey, Joe, can you cue this up? This is YouTube video I've got pulled up on the screen here. It's NBC News from the year 1983, and this is how they end the broadcast. Listen to this.
Bags or automatic seatbelts mandatory for new cars. Critics urged immediate action. And finally, a federal report today predicted possible catastrophic warming of the Earth by the 1990s with a strong climate change. I'm Jessica Savage in New York. More news later on
That's
this
again Jessica Savage from 1983 predicting catastrophic global warming and climate change by the 1990s. This is the same fake news then that we're hearing today, isn't it?
It is, and we keep hearing this news of climate catastrophe in 10 years or 12 years. In my book, I capture in 2005 the UN predicted that there would be 50 million climate refugees by 2010, and they actually listed in that report, they had a list of the most at-risk islands. They had a map there showing those. Well, I went back and I looked at the population I captured in my book, Inconvenient Facts, that I compared the census population data from 2005 to 2010, and the 4 most at-risk islands, well, the population had increased significantly. People were moving to the islands. They weren't fleeing from them. And then in 2015, the UN, the same group, made the same prediction. They said, oh, well, we were just a little bit off. In 2015, they said there'd be 50 million climate refugees by 2020. Well, we're almost there. And I'll go back, once 2020 rolls around and we get the data in, I'll look at the census data, and I'll bet you I'll bet you $10,000 that each one of those 4 at-risk islands also once again saw population increase, and not one person has fled from those islands.
Yeah, my goodness. So, I mean, I kind of want to know what. I know this is a loaded question, but I mean, this has been going on all the way back in 1983. That's a year before I was born. Then you had, this was going on even before that in the 70s with global cooling. I mean, we know all this. Where is it coming from? I mean, it's so hard for you to not think that there's some sort of agenda or conspiracy behind all of this to control the population based around this idea that the sky's going to fall any minute, so the solution has got to be we got to curtail this freedom or that freedom to save the planet. That's what it looks like to me, but it's been going on for a really long time.
Well, at my hearing, I testified yesterday. There were 2 ladies there wearing tinfoil hats. Whenever I spoke, they put their tinfoil hats on and that's what when we talk about these things, it sounds like this grand conspiracy, but you can't help but think that. I mean, what I do is expose the climate change lies that we're being told, and they just are these big hoaxes. And why are they? And that's the big question: why are they doing it? And I'm no more of an expert. I know a lot about climate change, but the politics of climate change, Paul, you or any one of your listeners are just as qualified to say why they're doing it. I can provide the data and the facts that say they are lying to you, but when it comes to why, your one of your listeners' 12-year-old son's listening with or eating breakfast, he's just as qualified to say why they're doing it as I am. I don't know. Is it control? Is it taxes? Is it one world government? But again, when we talk about things like this, it sounds we sound like we're crazy conspiracy theorists, but something's going on. There's some reason that there's so many climate change hoaxes out there, and there's so much lie and fear, and that's what this is all about, Paul. They need to create a climate of fear in the population, so we'll gladly pass things like the Paris Climate Accord or the Green New Deal. Yesterday, I proposed in Pennsylvania here. We have probably the most scenic part of Pennsylvania is called the Grand Canyon of Pennsylvania, the Pine Creek Gorge, and I told them when I finished up, I said, well, you're telling me that this is a crisis. Okay, I have a solution for you. We can't create enough electricity from wind and solar. Let's build a Pine Creek Gorge green energy hydroelectric process, and let's build a big dam, hydroelectric facility across Pine Creek Gorge, and we'll generate huge amounts of electricity, abundant, reliable electricity. Oh, you don't want to do that? Maybe it's not a crisis. You can make that same argument for the Grand Canyon. If we are an existential threat, if the Earth is going to be ending if we don't do something in 10 years and we have to get off of fossil fuels, why don't we construct another hydroelectric dam at the Grand Canyon? It's beautiful and all that, but it's a crisis after all, and we're all going to die. Sacrifices need made. Don't you agree?
I completely agree. Last question. Have you ever asked some of I'm assuming your colleagues on the other side of this issue, that if there really is a problem here, what measurements and circumstances must exist for the climate scare to be solved? Like what, have you ever asked them that? And can they even give an answer of like, okay, at what point do they shut up about this if we were to get to this temperature or that temperature?
Yeah. Well, I don't know about that. That's a good question. I will have to ask that, but I do know that Dr. Michael Mann from Penn State, the lead alarmist probably in the world, he was asked what's the ideal temperature for the Earth, and his response was, well, of course it was the temperature before we started adding CO2. Well, you know what that would put us, Paul? That would put us squarely in the middle of the horrifically cold Little Ice Age. That's, half the population of Iceland perished. A third of the population of the Earth died. That's what he wants. He wants us to go back to those horrific conditions. No, thank you. No, thank you. We know that throughout Earth's history, the warming periods like we're in right now have always been beneficial. And before climate science became politicized, those warm periods were called climate optima. They don't call them climate optima anymore.
Wow.
They need to sow fear and alarm.
Wow.
And history tells us just the opposite.
Geologist, scientist, author Gregory Wrightstone. Really appreciate it. Want to encourage everybody to get the Inconvenient Facts app on your smartphone. It'll help you talk with liberals if they're, brainwashed. Gregory, we really appreciate it, sir.
Thank you.